So my master's was 2 years, my doctorate was 2 years, and then you have to have 3,000 clinical hours of
Okay.
one-on-one sessions. That took about 3.5 years. So I sat for my licensure when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And I remember them saying to me, because you do a written test. Well, when I took it, there were two tests. You take a written test first, and I was 34 weeks pregnant. And they said, please, please don't go into labor here.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. For all those people watching us from around the world, Prince George is in British Columbia, and it's about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or about 800 kilometers for our friends down in Europe. And it's pretty nippy here right now. It is throughout North America, actually. So last week we had 42 below, and today it's about 18 below zero. And so it's a little bit on the cool side. Today we have a very, very special guest. Her name is Dr. Heather Browne, and she is a psychotherapist, an amazing, in a a mother of 25 years, and she takes that very, very serious, obviously, and she loves it deeply. You mind if I call you Heather, Dr. Heather? Heather?
I'd be honored.
Okay. Thanks, Heather. And you have such an very interesting bio, and you've been published in so many different areas. So maybe for our guest watching us, where are you located and physically? And then also tell us a little bit about your background and how it brought you to where you started to become the psychotherapist.
Sure. I'm in Southern California. So here it's 60 degrees above. So,
Wow.
but that's in Fahrenheit. But so much warmer here. And
Right.
I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years. I came to it like so many of us in the healing arts do, where I had a family that was pretty disjointed and confusing. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic, and she killed herself when I was 16. And so
Ooh.
seeing people and seeing her have a hard time trying to live within the reality that most of us walked, I just saw that we don't really understand anybody else's experience or thoughts or feelings. And I did a lot of work trying to understand and uncover mine. And as I did that, I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the fact that maybe I could help another person in their journey with what I had been through. I was actually going to be an actress. I was an actress for the first part of my life.
You're
And I would,
beautiful.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but
mean that.
one, it's limiting. And I was trying and trying and trying, but I was just so tall. And so one day, I have a very close relationship with God. He slammed me on the side of my head and he said, instead of pretending to be someone you're not, how about you just help people be who they are to be?
Yeah,
And I just kind of went, oh, that's blessed. And
yeah.
so that has been my path and my passion. And the more I do it, the more I fall in love with life and people and communication and connection. And so that's the journey that I'm on.
So when you were 16, this terrible thing happened in your life, just at the most critical part for a lot of young people, in particular, obviously also the daughter, and have to lose your mom in such a way must have been an a horrible shock.
It was a shock, but it wasn't a complete shock. Because when you live with someone who's really struggling with mental illness, you live
Right.
in that knowing they might not choose to stay. And there's so much chaos in your life, the
Yeah.
whole journey.
Did you have
Um,
siblings? Did you also have siblings then?
I have an older sister, and
Right,
she, I will say wisely, but there's two sides to it. Became very involved with boys and going out and having fun. And I stayed home with my mom and tried to keep her here. But I will also say I am unbelievably grateful for the relationship that I had with her and the time
right,
that I had with her because she truly was my first love. I
right.
adored my mom. I saw her as being tragically elegant, and I had a message from her post death, and it took a long time for it to come. It took 40 years for it to come, but she came to me in a meditation and she said, "I didn't want to leave you. I just couldn't stay." And I've always known that.
Yeah.
I've always known that. Her life was too hard on this earth to continue. And so when she did choose to do what she chose, we were all completely shocked. It was horrible, but yet you know when someone is struggling and struggling
Right.
and struggling.
So,
Yeah.
so was it schizophrenia on the base of that, or was it all the things that happened to her, and including that?
I would say both.
Right.
The paranoid schizophrenia was severe,
Right.
and that came out of a massively abusive childhood.
Right.
Um, a lot of mental illness, at least with her mom. I'm not sure with her dad. I don't think so with her dad, but definitely with her mom, a lot of mental illness. She tried to self-medicate with alcohol, so she was plastered a lot of the time. So there were a lot of reasons behind it. Yeah.
So then from that point forward, imagining 16 years old at a critical point in your life, so now you're still in high school likely, or and
Mhm.
so now you had to reconcile and find direction as to where to go. That means you had to then go to college, university to get your degree, and you have your doctorates. That must have been a long study to get to.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. School was always my escape.
yeah,
I love learning, and it made sense at school. Things were as you thought they would be. At home, I never knew. I never knew how troubled she'd be, how much alcohol she would have had, if I was gonna be accused of trying to kill her that day. So I'd go to
oof,
school and, I could write papers and I could take a test. And though I might not be great at everything, it made sense. I
yeah.
wrote a beautiful poetry or a prose piece called Slanting, and it's when I realized that she was crazy. I was 8 when I realized it, and I talked about how I had a hard time with with subtraction, that 7 could be broken down 4 and 3 and 6 and 1 and 5 and 2. It didn't make sense to me that things could be broken down in different ways. And I parallel that to my mom, that she was broken down in so many ways, and it never made sense to me, even though I tried really hard to understand it, from a child's perception. But when she died, I just dove into theater, which was another place of escape, and my education. And it took until I was in college and on my own. I was disowned at 17, so I went off to New York to become an actress. And I was my freshman year, and someone on the dorm room hall, poor girl, her name was Susan. I don't think she ever spoke to me after this night. She said to me, "What is it like to be perfect?" I remember I was 18 at the time, and I looked at her and I just said, "What?" And she said, "Well, you're really smart, you're beautiful, everyone likes you, and you're incredibly talented." I'd been cast as the lead in in the play. You're not supposed to audition when you're a freshman, but they asked me if I would, and I got the lead. And I remember looking at her and I just broke. And I said, I'm so far from perfect. I'm disowned. I'm on my own. I don't even know where I'm going to go for Thanksgiving because the dorms were going to close. And I remember looking at her and I was baffled. I just started sobbing and snot's pouring everywhere and tears are everywhere. And poor little Susan, like she thought she was making her a compliment, and I'm having this mental breakdown in her arms. And I realized that night, thank God for Susan, I didn't realize I was such a good actress.
Right.
And I realized you're going to be a really lonely woman if you don't figure this out.
Right.
And so I went to see the psychiatrist the next day, and
That
I said,
became the trigger, right?
yeah, because I was trying to look perfect. I was trying to
Yeah.
be. That's what I tried to do my whole childhood for my mom. Like, let
Exactly.
me just do everything right. Let me keep you alive. Let me be
Right.
super easy for you and full of joy and full of light and full of wonder, so you will choose to live. And then all of a sudden, when someone saw me as being so successful as that, thank God inside I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a shell. And
Yeah.
so I really started to do deep work, and it was brutal. It was brutal. But thank God I had beautiful people I worked with, and
Yeah.
I dug hard, and I wanted to know who I was. I Heather was a shell. I was a
Yeah.
pretty, smart, attractive, really successful shell. But
Yeah.
what did I think, feel, believe? I had no idea. I'd never really been a child. I played a child.
So you had to find you more or less as to who you really were. You already knew you were beautiful and all the other things that Susan was saying, but you were not in there. And then so then it became, I'm just kind of imagining this, is that then it puts you into a direction of helping others. And how could you do that in a most effective way? It was then to go through the university, and must have been very, very hard to do, but you developed a passion for that direction, with the results that you could help those people that were searching for who they were, or relationships that had challenges and difficulty, and hopefully being able to change them, or whoever they were. Yeah.
Well, and I believe in God, and God was amazing in the whole experience because I was diving so deeply into trying to figure out who I was. I was working in a group home for throwaway teenage girls because I'd kind of felt like I was thrown away. I was thrown away, not kind of.
Right.
And so I wanted to give them the childhood that I never had. And I fell in love with these beautiful, beautiful, sweet girls who were hurting so deeply. And I approached my director and said, I would be an amazing therapist, but I can't afford the master's program. And he said, well, we'll help. And then I went to schools and said, I need a scholarship. And they all said, yeah, we don't do that. And one wonderful school, Riacon, he said, we've never offered that. And I said, I will clean shoes. I will clean toilets. I'll be your
Anything.
security guard, but I can't afford, I already have student loans for undergrad. I can't afford it. And I will be an amazing therapist. And so it was hard to work full time and get my master's at the same time. But I was so hungry for the knowledge, and I
Right.
was so hungry to be able to use all of these experiences I had. And the more I was in my studies, the more I realized, dear God, Heather, you've got like a wealth of information. You've got alcoholism, you've got mental instability, you've got suicide, you've got runaway, you've got disowned, you've got reparenting, you've got a parentified child. I mean, I had so much
You
that
seen it all, you lived it all, right? Right from a very far too young an age.
and
You
it
went
gave me
through
this
all of it.
incredible opportunity to sit with people and not be scared or shocked by what they
Right.
say, but they're like, okay, my experience is very different, but this is heavy. How can I help you here?
Right.
And so it it just was meant to be. I was just
Right.
supposed to be a therapist. And so God just opened that door and I had like the most amazing internship where they fell madly in love with me and they just said, "We want to give you tons of people." And so I did that through my licensure and then I put up a shingle and people want to work with me and I do great work. And so it's been an amazing journey. I work hard, I work diligently, I give a lot, and people really, really find the ways to heal themselves. That's what I do. I create a very comforting, supportive, honest, um, directed container to help them explore themselves to find what it is that they need to find to heal themselves.
So,
And it works perfectly.
so the so once you finished with your got your master's, how old were you then?
I was 29, and then my dad stepped much more actively back into my life. He'd been on the periphery, since I was disowned, and he said, "You've you've gone further in education than anybody has ever in our family." Like, "Uh-huh." And he said, "If I were to pay for your doctorate, would you receive it?" I had no plan to get a doctorate because you could get your license with your master's, and I was very close to that already. But I love education. I said, "No strings attached?" He said, "No strings attached." I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
So jumped right back in, got my doctorate. During that process, I got married. During that process, I had my first child, and the rest the rest is history.
So how long did it take you then? That was you were 29, I believe, that you got your master's, and then how much more did it take to get your doctorate?
So my master's was 2 years, my doctorate was 2 years, and then you have to have 3,000 clinical hours of
Okay.
one-on-one sessions. That took about 3.5 years. So I sat for my licensure when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And I remember them saying to me, because you do a written test. Well, when I took it, there were two tests. You take a written test first, and I was 34 weeks pregnant, and they said, Please, please don't go into labor here."
Yeah.
And then I passed the test, and then you find out 6 weeks later you sit for your oral boards if you pass. And so I had just had my daughter 4 weeks before, and so then I sat for my oral boards and passed, and that's when I became licensed.
Yeah. So you have one daughter, or you have more
I
children?
have a daughter and a son.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have
What are
two
the
beautiful.
names, Heather? I always like to know what, the things that
Sure. So,
mean so
so
much to you. Yeah, obviously.
Ted I was married to Ted for 20 years. He passed 9 years ago, and
Mhm.
we had a dog together named Shasta, and I love that name. And I thought I wanted to have Sierra if we had a daughter. And Ted was kind of cheeky at times, and he'd say, "Well, we already have one mountain range. Like, why have two?"
Yeah.
So then he started to throw around names that were with Brown because my last name's Brown, and so he did like Coco. I'm like, I'm not a Coco kind of girl. And then he threw out Cinnamon, and the nickname would be Cinny. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But
Yeah.
apparently, there was a young girl in Anaheim who had killed her mother named Cinnamon Brown. So that was vetoed by his mom.
Yeah.
And then Ted threw out Sienna, which is a reddish brown color of earth. And I went, oh,
Say it once
so
more. I didn't quite get that.
Santa Marie Brown. And then my son is named after my family name. I'm the last Mackerline in the world. Well, I was. So Mac is Theodore Mackerline Brown. He's
Right.
named after his dad and his grandpa, and then my dad.
Beautiful.
So beautiful children. I'm so blessed. They're the most wonderful children you could ever have. And we've had quite a journey between life and homeschooling and then losing their dad and me being a single mom. And they're exceptional children. Very deep, very rooted, very creative, very adventuresome, full of love.
Now
They're
losing your husband, he was still fairly young too then,
It just turned
right?
51.
Wow, too
Yeah.
young. Yeah.
It's been kind of a
Illness.
wild journey,
Yeah.
truly. Kind of
Yeah.
a wild journey in my life.
I would say, yeah, but again, the I looked at your bio, and in particular, in regards to you being in so many publications, you
I love
likely are. I didn't see it here directly, but you probably are a speaker on all kinds of different topics.
Yeah, I just did a TEDx too. So that was really fun. I'd never done a TEDx before. So I did that in September. Yeah.
What is that?
It's like a TED Talk, but instead
Oh,
of being the
TED
big
Talk.
TED stage, the TEDx's are they are a separate entity where a city will ask if they can do their own, and then they pull people that they want to have come that fit the conversation that they're going to have. So I did it in Mount Rubidoux, California, in September, and it was a wonderful. It was a 5 month process from being chosen to actually giving your talk. So it was very extensive, but learned so much. Beautiful people, and I'm very comfortable just doing this, sitting and talking. It's very different to prepare a speech and to
Right.
stand up and present. And so I had to work a long time to have it feel like it was just me talking once again. But I loved it. It was a great experience.
So you're a good communicator, obviously, and that's already obvious from just having you on my podcast. So if I look at all the other things in particular that there are not too many things that you are not counseling on. Is it
There's a couple. I don't specialize. I don't work with domestic violence at all. I just don't want to. I don't work court appointed because I want to work with people who want to work. I don't work with children 15 and below. It's too hard for my heart because most of
right?
it's child abuse, and
Too
that's just very, very,
emotional, yeah.
it is too much. I tried for 2 years and I thought I can't do this. Um, and then I don't work with severe drug addiction because my viewpoint is they really need to work with someone who's a specialist.
Yeah.
Those 3 areas I don't, but everything else I do not have the training to walk through transgender transsexuality. I have a lot of people that reach out to me. They're like, "Heather, I want to work with you." And I say, "Bless you dearly, but you cannot have me having you be a guinea pig for me, trying to figure out what's the hormones, what's natural, what's not natural." So I don't have the training for that. So I don't do that either.
Right. So if you kind of look at, what is the area in particular that you like to work with? With individuals, with couples, with,
Both,
yeah,
both.
saying that, I've
I
been
love
married
individuals.
for 40 years, and we've fallen kind of out of love, and not with me, I'm in love with my wife, so, but
I'm so glad.
yeah, hypothetically speaking, is saying that how can we kind of rekindle our relationship, and then what happens to couples sometimes, or that they drift away from each other, are maybe not as communicative as they could or should be, or are not being honest about it a lot of times in terms of talking to but not listening, and not opening the door for, or talking about, Heather, I feel this way, and that type of an interaction is
Well, and
that.
mine tend to be a little bit more severe. I tend to have people who are not making time for each other, and there's a lot of resentment and anger. Um, I see a lot of infidelity,
Yeah.
a lot. So it's lovely when someone comes to me and they've fallen out of love and they want to step back in. Um, I'd love to see more clients like that because that's really beautiful, sacred, like yummy work to work with. I tend to work with people that have waited a little too long to come to therapy. Lots and lots of infidelity. Yeah.
Right.
Sadly. Yeah. But every single person will come and say, I don't really feel loved. I don't feel heard. I don't feel important. I don't feel valued. I don't feel respected. So whether it's early on or whether it's far upon that path, there's so much you can do. There's so much you can do. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I look at these couples that are just falling away from each other and not realizing it and rejecting love from each other and not aware that they're doing that and having massive expectations and judgments upon each other and shaming and blaming and just not loving the other person well and not helping their partner love them well. And I have all these exercises that I've created to cultivate connection and tenderness and laughter and fun and intimacy. And I thought, gosh, I want to take this beyond the one on one. So people have been asking me for years to write a book. So finally in COVID, I thought it's time. And so now it's about to be out. And I'm so excited to be able to
Have you
share
got
it with
a
the
have you got the book close to you there that you can kind of show it to us? Is it
no
printed yet? Is it at
uh, the a in 8 days.
in 8 days?
In 8 days, it will be a physical book. Right now, it's all locked in, and they're in the process of printing and doing all those last minute things. But January 23rd is when it will be finally out to the world, and I will be waiting eagerly for my copy to come as well.
What is you have a name for it, or a
Oh
title?
yeah, speaking with the heart. hmm Transforming communication and relationship with compassion and connection. Yeah.
And
So I
and
cover all the main areas. I cover what is communication, what are the five, pinnacles of conversation, why do we fall out of love, and how do we drift in that journey. I cover attachment styles and love languages and anxiety, sex, money, family, anger, rejection, depression, play, how to step in, how to receive love, how to give love. I cover most
it
really important aspects of being in a relationship.
is one of the most difficult areas for couples to speak from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
we speak from
and
our mind.
yeah, is that the most difficult part?
Yes. And that came from my mom. So there was a time, I talk about it in my TEDx, I talk about it in my book, where she thought that the helicopters flying over the house were coming to get her, and she was completely petrified. And my dad did what probably most men would do, "Ginny, you're crazy. It's all in your head. They're not coming to get you." But she was petrified, and I'm looking at her. I was 12, and I remember thinking, like, "This isn't working. What does she need?" And she needed to feel safe. So I grabbed my blue blankie and I threw it over her head and I held her and hugged her and I said, "They're not going to get you, mommy. They're not going to get you." And the helicopter flew away. She eventually came out and she looked up at me and her eyes said, "You believe me?" Which I didn't. But I noticed that if I'm going to say allowed her to have her reality, which really isn't the right wording, but if I were to respect her reality, I could still respect mine. And the blanket could be a bridge of compassion between our different experiences. And I could love her in hers, and she could receive my love in hers. And it was this beautiful moment, probably for her too, but certainly for me to realize we don't communicate the right way. We start with words. That's not
Yeah,
it. It starts with love. It
yeah,
starts with love, which then allows me to connect, which then allows me to speak. And so
yeah,
if we would turn communication on its head and not worry so much about the words that we're going to say, but to care more so about the relationship. What I tell my clients is communication is a love letter, and compassion is the bridge between your reality and my reality. And so
Right.
if I care more about your heart, the words will work out. And so what I tell my clients is no matter what the topic is, no matter what the topic is, your relationship is more important. And so if you're going to start a conversation, to me, if it's a tough one, I'm going to start it with, I want you to know how much I love you and how important it is for me for us to walk through this well. And so please let me know if I say something or do something that pulls you away because I want to attend to that because I in no way want to hurt you.
Right.
And then that's a different relationship. That's a different conversation. So I'm really skilled at helping people come together and then figure out pacing where, you're getting scared. Okay, then how do we bring in more security here? How do we bring a little bit more structure here? How do
Right.
we help you soothe yourself here? It's a beautiful gift to learn how to help your partner love you. It's
Right.
not your partner's responsibility to figure it out. It's
No.
your responsibility to ask and to
Right.
guide. And so I
Exactly.
walk clients through that in my book. Yeah.
So most of the time that when people know that in a relationship that they are drifting away for whatever reason, then a big step forward is that obviously that both of them recognize it
Mhm.
and say we need help. But that's not always so. Sometimes it's one that recognizes that, the other may not, and then the one that is not together but that they still wants to stay together, I'm just hypothetically presenting a situation, then would you then recommend, at least in my mind, that I'm not an expert other than living life and being observant, I guess, is then I would say the party that wants to stay together seek skilled help so you, before things drift further, that then can gradually work on bringing the two people together for either whatever they have, their kids, or the other more important things, and whatever may have been the reason, is not is material, but really just should and can, in some cases, should not always be the deciding factor that they should go apart, but rather, so many people do these days, though, maybe up to 50% of the relationships, I don't know if
More
that is the number, maybe even
higher. It's
more.
like 60. Well, it's hard to do life together for a really long time. It's hard to do all of those components. Ted and I were
Right,
together for 5 years. There's a lot of changing that goes on. But
right,
there's a place in the drift, and you're right. There tends to be one person who's more concerned about it than the other. But once again, I think we go about it in a way that's not really healthy. The person who feels like they're not receiving love to the depth that they want to receive love will normally kind of go after their partner and say, why aren't you really loving me? Or why aren't you buying me flowers? Or why aren't we having sex? Or it turns into a complaint, it turns into you're doing something wrong or you don't love me as much. And what's wrong with you? Instead, if you were to say, gosh, I don't feel as close to you as I have in the past, I don't think I'm loving you as well because I don't feel as connected to you and I miss you. One of the things that Ted and I did, it's in my book, it's called The Position, and we would do it almost every night, is he would lay on the bed and I'd lay on my side, and we'd wrap up in each other's arms, and we'd lay there for 5 minutes, and we would only speak deeply loving things. So it wasn't like, "Did you remember to call the plumber?" or "What happened with the accountant?"
yeah,
It was, "It feels so good to be in your arms." Like, I'm so grateful to be here with you. And we would just melt into each other's arms. And whether we were in a great place or whether one of us was like super pissed off at the other, if we would lay there long enough, we would come together more so than we had been when we started. And that that changed things dramatically for us because
Right.
we would come into a place of connection once again and deeper love. And if we were really upset with each other, we'd get a little closer. If we were good, we'd get a lot closer. And so what I tell clients is to do that. And my kids got so savvy with it, they would say, like, should you go do that thing in your in the bedroom that you do? And Ted would be like, is this sick? I'm like, no, this is lovely. So if he would come in the night, let's say dinner time, and we hadn't had our little position time, he'd say, could you pass the salt? I'm like, yeah, here. We had our position time. He'd say, baby, would you pass the salt? I'd say, yeah, of course I will, sweetheart. And I'd touch his hand because we were sharing love. We don't realize the beauty of entrances and exits. You've gone off and you've done work all day long, probably been a businessman and a businesswoman. You've dealt with a whole lot of problems. You walk in the door and you're a businessman or a businesswoman. You deal with a whole lot of problems. What happened with the bills? Where's the dog? Where's the kid? What's for dinner? And we don't
Yeah.
fall back into partner. And
Right.
so when Ted would go cuddle up in the bed, and when I tell clients about this, they say, we don't take 5 minutes ever. Like, why? Like 5 minutes, that's so long. I'm like, out of 24 hours, it's really not. And I can tell. I can
You
tell.
may
They come
like
back.
it.
They love it. I'll walk out of
Yeah.
the room.
Yeah.
I'll say, I'm going to walk out of the room. I'll be right outside the door,
Yeah.
cuddle, and
Yeah.
then call me when you come back in. And they're like, I can't
Yeah.
believe I'm paying you to stand outside. I'm like, yeah, but wasn't that yummy? So there's the place of if you're just holding yourself back from receiving love. Why?
But it's an acquired skill, hence your specialty, because you know it works. And then
Yeah.
the other part, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, is that to have a relationship, it's not my job to make you happy. You have to make you happy. That is, and I have to make me happy, is not the other way around. And then the other part is that we have to be friends first and foremost and have respect.
Yes.
And if that is the foundation, then on that we can build. And saying that, especially in relationships that have many, many years behind it, it's not anymore puppy love the way it used to happen way back when we were dating or in the honeymoon period. But then from there on forward, is still the attraction can be still there because it's based on friendship first and foremost, and this feeling of comfort, including the 5 minutes, because that
It's
is
a
kind of right.
yeah, well, it's important that you keep liking
Yeah,
your partner. And a
yeah,
lot of people will say, I will always love him, but I don't like him.
yeah,
And of course, in moments where the person's being a jerk or when you're being a jerk, but
yeah,
overall, if you don't like the person you're with, it's going to be really hard. I remember I would watch Ted playing with the kids and I'd 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 go outside, I'd be like, "Oh," he's like, "What?" I'm like, "I just fell in love with you again."
yeah,
It's like, "Really?" Like, "Yeah." He would do something with the kids and my heart would just like leap. And he's like, "How long is it gonna last?" I'm like, "I don't know, like 2 minutes, but like it feels really good right now." And then you go back into life and you do life again. But it's it's also important to realize it's up to you to decide if you like your partner or not.
yeah.
You liked them at one point. I heard a podcast that was so funny about couples, and the guy said, he said, "You used to be such a beautiful, sweet woman, And I have turned you into such a B, and I gotta stop this. And I just laughed. But I thought, good for him for realizing he was creating a
Exactly.
challenge for her to stay kind and sweet and beautiful. And
Right.
every woman wants that. We want to be a princess. We want to be
Yeah.
desired, chosen, and adored. And men want to be respected and
Yeah.
wanted and appreciated. So when you realize that and you speak
And
into that
and and
day,
being proud of no matter what, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The prince on the white horse.
Exactly.
It's important to know, how does your partner feel the most loved,
Yeah.
and to recognize the pivotal role you play in that. Of course, other people can say you're handsome, other people can say you're brilliant, but to hear it from the person you have chosen to be your life partner, there's nothing that can touch that. I talk about it in my book where physical touch, it happens with other people because we're so hungry for touch, but you want it with your partner. And so there's the words of affirmation. It's different when your partner is telling you you're beautiful and you're amazing and they're so proud of you and they want to, tell the world how amazing you are. No one's going to stray unless they have a sex addiction with all of that going on. But we forget that. I used to tell myself all the time when I would drive home, remember that he loves you and that you love him. Remember you love him. Remember you love him. Because the reality is, we go into a relationship wanting to be loved by that person always and wanting to love that person always. If we remember that, I know you want to love me. I sure as God am not feeling it right now, but I know you want to. So can I help you so I feel it more? If you hold on to that truth that everybody wants their relationship to be amazing and to last forever, when it's not, when you let yourself take the responsibility of doing what you can do, it will change. Now,
Right.
maybe not completely. I see a lot of people solo to do couples work, but we can do a lot because when one person is caring for the other and offering the beauty of them and is really learning how to deal with their reactions and their responses, so much can change. Any challenge in any situation needs more love. Any challenge in the world, any challenge in relationship, any challenge in a conversation simply needs more love. And so if someone's coming at you angry, mad, frustrated, bitter, resentful, attacking, as long as you're not being physically harmed, if you're able to, know that if you offer more love, it will shift. And even if the other person doesn't change in their demeanor, you have not made it worse. You have made it better because you have not added to it.
You
And
cannot lose, right?
yes. And then the next time, they're going to recognize that about you. They're going to start to come with less anger because the more times they realize they don't need to defend yourself. I had an amazing awareness. Someone came to me and they said, I need to ask you a question, but I think you're going to be angry. And my thought was, well, why the heck ask me the question then?
Yeah.
But I said, okay, well, maybe I can just let it be a question. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, maybe I can just let it be a question and just answer it. She said, do you think you can do that? And I said, I don't know. We'll find out. So she asked her question. In my experience, it was self-righteous, it was judgmental, it was ugly. And I wanted to, say something rude back. I wanted to be like, who the hell do you think you are? And I thought, Heather, don't. Let it be a question. I took a super deep breath and I went, whew, no, don't have anything to be worried about. Everything's absolutely fine. I'm all good. And she looked at me and she said, I'm so impressed with how you handled that. I said, yeah, me too. But I realized something so important. I don't ever have to choose to be offended.
Right.
I can decide. I don't have to choose to be hurt by you. I can
Exactly.
choose what I let in and where I let it in and why I let it in. And if I don't want to have negative feelings with you, towards you, it's really important that I'm not pushing them on you, but just say, let me take care of me for a moment. Woo! And then as much as
Right.
possible, realize you must be hurting. You're trying to hurt me. You must be hurting. And I'm so
Right.
sorry that you are. I'm not going to keep myself in your presence while you're trying to hurt me, but I'm
Right.
so sorry you're hurting. I do not choose to hurt you back.
Right.
Yeah. It's all about
Now,
compassion.
yeah. Now, if I look back, Heather, just my observation, I'm 83 years old, and so if I look back to my parents, that 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, they had then more difficulty in expressing their feelings to each other, more so than we see today. In a general sense, we are more open today. But on the other hand, that's the good part of it. The other part of it is that we are so preoccupied with staying alive financially and all the other pressure, politics, and all the other things that come into the equation of having a relationship, that they didn't worry all that much about those kind of things then, other than warriors and all the other parts that made things difficult, and especially growing up during a difficult period. I was born in Holland in 1940, just
Mm,
during the war years, and was
yes.
tough going there then. And my parents were married in 1938, and fairly quickly had a daughter and a son. And then I came along in November the 1st, 1940, and my dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and
Oh,
the last time that they heard from him was during the bombing of Rotterdam, and then for 5 years they would know if he was dead or alive during
oh my
that.
goodness.
Yeah, and then obviously the war was quite difficult, and especially where we were living in the extreme northeastern part of Holland, 10 minutes away from the border with Germany, and and then my mom was trying to raise me, born in 1940, and then my sister 1 year older, my brother 2 years older, and I still remember from the time that the bombers were overhead bombing Germany by the Allied forces to get them to give up or surrender the war, and we would see hundreds and hundreds of planes overhead, daytime, nighttime bombing, and my mom would take us out as kids, looking towards Germany, and the whole sky would be red because we could see some of those major cities, Kiel, Bremen, the Wilhelmshaven, and all those kind of places in Hamburg that were burning during that period, and my mom felt safer outside than inside. The war years were difficult, and it would not be for 5 years after that that after we got liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, I was then 5, and it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to the land. My dream was to go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and I did when I was 23. But
Mm.
but I wanted to share with you is that it was very, very difficult time then, and we saw far too much that we should not have seen because the fighting was pretty bad. And myself, my brother, sister, every morning we would go out into the railroad yards with gunny bags and pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They would boot us one and we'd be back the following day. So when seeing far too much, being then affected by PTSD, fearing the loss of the parent, the only parent that was looking after us. So, and I was affected by the inner child, and had counseling for that actually when well into my 50s. Here, very
Oh, I'm sure.
emotional,
Well, I'm
very
sure
emotional.
all of that. Yeah. I
But
remember
but
saying in the 20s that my generation is too soft. And he said, "What do you mean?" My dad went through the Depression and World War II and then everything beyond. I said, "My generation hasn't gone through anything.
no,
I'm too young to really remember Vietnam, 9/11." But you speak of something that is so, so different about like the 1960s and beyond child. Your family had to just try to survive.
yeah,
Like it was a blessing if you were alive. Hopefully you
exactly,
had food. Hopefully you weren't like physically, maimed. Obviously, emotionally you're going to be, probably psychologically as well, socially, financially. I mean, you went through such a horrific thing that when you find love, you probably handle it very differently. Plus, pre-1970s, marriage was largely about how well do we fit together and how well
right,
can we part. And then come the 70s, it's, sex, love, and happiness. Do you turn me on? Or like, you've got love handles now, so I'm out.
right,
We became very shallow, very, very self-focused and shallow. And marriages have changed drastically, though we don't treat them differently. We still think about them in the archaic viewpoint of the husband and wife that stay together forever, but we don't do that. We divorce. And so we need to look at if you're going to be in a modern marriage saying you need to thrill me and I need to be fulfilled and all these things, then how do you create that?
exactly.
It's important. It's
So,
important.
so, the, so the experience that I had when my dad did come back, and then after
He
being
lived.
gone, he lived, and
Oh my
and 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 came back 5 years when we got liberated by the Canadians, and then but it always stayed with him. And as I watched them through their marriage, they were beautiful parents, but they didn't have that closeness, or they, like, the I would express to my wife that I love her quite freely. uh, you didn't do that then, and then being apart for 5 years affected their relationship in the sense, and then him being affected by PTSD because he was in the underworld, and then fighting against the German army for an hunt, but he was affected by PTSD and then developed alcoholic dependency from that point forward in his life, and it affected them. But they were together, but loved each other, but didn't. And that's really the point that I want to make, is kind of looking back in my own experience. They had a difficult time, challenges, but it is not as it is today. Easily say they go their own directions, as you were saying, and that was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and then as you went through that, relationships became different, still having other challenges, a lot of times either financial or now all of a sudden both parents had to become working in order so that they can have the economic standard to have a house, and so lots more other pressures on relationship other than just the
Oh, huge.
basic ones. Yeah.
Well, and your dad did not come back the same man he was. There's
No.
no way he could have. And
No.
your poor mom, going through 5 years raising children on her own, not knowing if her husband's alive or dead, having to raise children through war
And find something to eat on a
and,
daily basis. You know.
and feeling safer out in the bombing of the city than within your own home. She changed drastically too. And I think that's
Exactly.
something that we don't really think of, that people change. And how do you allow yourself and how do you help yourself love that person as they are? If someone's had, brain injury and they come back and their personality is now different and how they are with you is now different. They might not even remember you. But how do you love someone as they change,
Exactly.
as they age, as they are hurt? I had a friend whose wife was raped and violently, and she didn't recover. She really didn't. And it was so hard for him because their relationship changed dramatically, and it wasn't what he wished it to be. But marriage isn't about what I wish you to be. Marriage is about I am committing myself to you. And I take it very seriously. I know people say, well, it's no longer serving me, so I'll step out. But then my viewpoint is, well, then have a different institution that you're calling what you're doing. Because to me, that's not really marriage. Marriage is, if you're going to say vows, I am staying with you. Whether you're a quadriplegic, whether you come back from war, whether we don't have money, I'm going to be here. And we don't look at marriage that way now. As long as you treat me well and as long as I'm happy with you, as long as it's working good for me, I'll stay. And you'll hear people say, well, don't I deserve to be happy? And I say, of course you do, but you create that for yourself. That's not to your partner. You don't divorce your partner because you're not happy. But we become very selfish. And
Yeah.
certainly your family, my goodness, the sacrifices that you all went through, your childhood, your mom and your dad, so much of their life, and then also so much of their future going forward. I don't even know how you live beyond something like that. I know you must or you die.
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl, a huge, huge hero to me, holding
Yeah.
on to the truth that he had to find a way to love humanity, to not come through scathed horrifically, and choosing to look at his captors as having some compassion for him.
Yeah.
Glorious.
Yeah.
Think about that compared to today's age. In a concentration camp, getting through Auschwitz, horrific conditions, like
Yeah.
people not really caring if you're alive or dead every single day, and still choosing to love, still choosing to honor, still choosing to be loyal and faithful. We're a different breed now. I know we have it within us to be different, but I hope we can bring it soon because our world needs more people that their word really is their word and a commitment to humanity that we
And
have
the
lost.
and the other part, Heather, now, as somebody that grew up during the war years, like myself, and still remembers, all the sacrifices that people make and all the bad parts about war, of that. As we look now at Europe, the Ukraine, we look at the Middle East, we look at all the things that are happening out there, and then a lot of times what I find is that us living here in Canada, I fly around a lot, and on my businesses that I do, and I look out of the window in my planes, the planes that I fly, and I say it's paradise. Is that we are so lucky and so fortunate, and not only here, we do a lot of business in the United States as well, and the same there. I fly around and say it's paradise, and then I think about the people in the Ukraine, the Middle East, and all the things that are happening there, and and saying how lucky we are. And then I feel sometimes, a lot of times actually, that we are taking it too far, too much for granted to live in democratic countries,
Absolutely.
that, and taking it for granted, although it can change tomorrow, that all of a sudden being in dictatorships like Russia, like North Korea, like Venezuela, Cuba, those kind of places, North Korea, and where people are living, and are making $2 a week or whatever they are making, and we are living in the land or in the continent of plenty, and I'm not sure that we appreciate that in a lot of cases.
I think you almost can't when you haven't experienced it because you can't know what it is. I remember when I was really young, my mom drove our family down with my dad to Tijuana several times, just across the border into Mexico.
Sure.
And we didn't go to eat. We just went to drive around. And she would stop and she'd say, "Look." We'd look out the window and the homes were cardboard homes.
Yeah.
And I remember asking her, I think it was probably about 6 or 7, "Why are you taking us here?" And she said, "So that you realize and you remember how
How
fortunate you
lucky.
are."
Yeah.
And she didn't do it to make us feel guilty.
No.
She didn't. She just really wanted us to see how the other half lives. There's a wonderful, wonderful book called How the Other Half Lives, and it's about the immigration in New York, 1890s, 1880s, and these different families that came, the Irish, um, um, the Italian, and the life that they had to live to make it, and how hard it was. And
Right.
they would work people who are very wealthy, and the difference, kind of like, in the Nazi regime where they would be having their chocolates and their cigarettes and their caviar and their vodka, and the poor people in the concentration camp were hoping for a potato in their soup. But
Yeah.
there is that place of trying to recognize all that we do have. And I think you can't really, really fathom that unless you see what you don't have.
Exactly.
And as a parent, I think that'd probably be a very wise thing to show your child how blessed we are and treasure it and be grateful for it and take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And be involved in the community and give back to the community, and and those are all very critical points. But Heather, this was an amazing conversation about relationships. Can you share with us once more the title of your book, and
Sure.
then have you got a website that our friends can watch? And once your book comes out, it likely will be available with all the major areas like Amazon and all the other ones.
Yes. So it's called Speaking with the Heart,
Yeah.
because that is what I guide people to do in their lives and with themselves. And my website is www.drheatherbrowne.com. So drheatherbrowne.com. And it's kind of the hub of me. So if you go there, you'll see the book will be out on the 23rd. So you'll see the information for signing up for my newsletter to be notified when the book comes out, my workshops. I've got freebies, my TEDx courses, it's all on there, all my social media as well. Certainly, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask, I'd be honored to answer anything that your listeners may have. What an amazing man you are. What an honor for me to have been chosen to be able to sit with you and hear a little bit of your story.
Well, the
Really,
feelings is mutual, Heather, because you have an amazing story too, and obviously an amazing experience. And but in particular, is interesting from my perspective is that coming from a real challenging period through your childhood into young adulthood, and then uh, through circumstances bringing you into psychiatry in particular, and in university, and not only have your master's, became a doctorate, and then using it in the way you're doing, and obviously being very, very successful. It was a privilege to have you on my podcast.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.